You're watching The Citizen Report, real, in-depth American.
Welcome to The Citizen Report. I'm Jonathan Shannon. Thank you for joining me tonight. As always, this newscast is real, in-depth American. It's always good to be back here with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, I've been off for the last few weeks, as I'm sure some of y'all have noticed. It is not without good reason, and I might speak on that a bit at the end of the show. And I just wanted to come on actually to say a couple of things. So this might end up being more of a commentary episode more than it is, a bona fide or, actually operating as a newscast. But I want to speak on some of the current events that have been transpiring in the news cycles in the last number of days. I'm sure most of you are well aware at this point that in Minneapolis, Minnesota, there was a second shooting involving an ICE officer, a member of ICE, Immigration Custom Enforcement, and a civilian. And I don't need to really get into the nitty-gritty of the details of that, but the reason I mention all of this, frankly, is because, well, I've been thinking about this, and really something doesn't sit right with me about any of this. And what I mean by that is, as it relates to, I'm trying to think of the right way to land this argument, but basically, with respect to the protesters, it's not an organic uprising, okay? Let me be very clear, and I'm just going to come right out and say what I think it really is. It is what you might call an inorganic uprising with the ultimate goal of they actually intend to ultimately overthrow the American government and institute a communist takeover to usurp our constitutional republic. Our constitutional republic, folks, is under great duress. It is under a lot of distress, I should say. And I would argue that President Trump is trying to correct that and is trying to put back into place the government as it's supposed to operate. And in order to do that, he has to first take some pretty difficult steps in order to get there. And one of the things is undoing what the deep state's been doing in last number of years, bringing in people that had no legal right to be here. And in fact, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you have a privilege that's granted at the border of whether you come in or not. Whether you're being a member of your country or citizen of your country, if that requires a visa or not. All entry by people who are not U.S. citizens and are not permanent residents, they have no legal right to be here. And actually, I should say only U.S. citizens have that right. And what we have seen over the last number of years, this is no secret. I'm just preaching to the choir, of course, but for the sake of, just saying it for the record, basically, you've had millions upon millions of people brought into this country who were brought in under illegal pretenses. And moreover, it wasn't just for the sake of, bringing in people. It's not like, you've heard people, Democrats especially, make the case that, they'll make a number of emotional arguments, which, in my opinion, when it appeals to the emotion and only that, it's not a real argument. But basically, what they say essentially is, we've got to, we can't be mean to people. We can't deny people the American way of life and stuff. But the problem with that is, if you don't have standards, if you don't have law and order, you don't have a country. And if you don't have borders, you also don't have a country. And so what the deep state has been doing is they have been bringing in people, not just because they decided to. It wasn't just that. Far from it. In fact, what they did is they were trying to bring in people because if America goes, so goes the world, basically. And what I mean by that is, in order to bring America down and thus the world, you've got to dilute the American populace. And so what they've been doing is bringing in people illegally, of course, and they've been, giving them benefits, basically bankrupting the American government, bankrupting our entire financial system. And it's just, I'm just thinking about this too, how you have seniors, disabled people, you have all these different people that are U.S. citizens, who have, for example, for Social Security, paid into that system. That's a whole other topic, the system itself, but they paid into it. And when they retire, they expect to get it. And they get this paltry amount per month and these teeny tiny cost of living adjustments, yearly usually. And then you hear reports that illegals are getting free housing, free cell phones, and they're getting these gigantic paychecks. I mean, it is ghastly, some of the things I've been hearing about that. And so what President Trump is doing right now, it's not a simple thing. It's a difficult task. But it has to be done, because if you don't do it, we don't have a country. And we're on the verge. We were this close. And frankly, folks, we're still this close to losing this country. And I don't say that to be an alarmist. In fact, one of the points of this video is to say the opposite, because one of the things that I've been noticing over these, events is how the mainstream Mockingbird media, how they've been trying to scare people into a course of action. And I'll just for a quick review, I'll mention this, like 9/11, for example. People can make arguments about who was really behind 9/11. I'm just going to simply say, for the sake of argument, what they did with that event is they passed things like Patriot Act, and it's always the opposite. So Patriotic Act is really the treasonous act, or unpatriotic act, certainly. Real ID, I think that falls under that law, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong about that. Or actually, it might be under a different law, Real ID. But anyways, Real ID, we had Real ID before, and now they want to call any ID that doesn't conform to federal standards to be not Real ID. And, I could go on and on and on, like affordable health care is unaffordable. All of this is by design, because it's very, very slow. It's been very, very slow, but they've had to erode our constitutional liberties, our constitutional rights, which are not given by the Constitution. They are confirmed, you might say, by the Constitution. They are truly, it's actually like, it's in essence enshrining the natural law, if you will. Common law, which is kind of another way of saying natural law. It's, people try to have different ways of saying that, but basically law, basically the rights, of yourself as an individual are ultimately from God, basically God through Jesus Christ. And so, and they've had to erode all of this over many, many years. It is not random. It is perfectly by design. And so what are they trying to do now is they're having, as the communists might call it, the useful idiots, brought out and causing chaos. Because, and this is the other thing I've heard too, this is something else I'll say, but it's something I've heard, and that is basically in this whole, if you want to call it a psyop or whatever you want to call it, I've heard different things. I'm not an insider, by the way, but what I've heard, and I believe it may well be true, is that Trump was recruited by military generals. From what I understand, 200 military generals recruited Trump, and there was a plan B. There were other people that would have run for president, as I understand it. I don't know this to be true. I'm just simply repeating what I'm about to say. I'm just kind of repeating the essence of it. Essentially, you've had people in the military who realized what was happening, and JFK was assassinated by the deep state. I mean, that's no secret. And they, over the course of time, the military generals got together and said, we got to do, the only way this is going to work if we're going to restore the constitutional republic as it's supposed to be is if we lawfully do it with someone at the helm of it, basically. And so Trump was recruited, and this is what you're seeing right now. You're seeing a lot of chaos taking place. The enemy, Satan, is very upset about this because this whole plan that the deep state had was to bring America down through the 16-year plan. 8 years of Obama, 8 years of Hillary, and then it would have been the end of this republic because we would have gotten into a war. Hillary would have brought us into it. Our Constitution would have been, I guess, suspended or just done away with, something like that. We weren't supposed to win ultimately in that war or whatever, transpired there. But we are where we are right now. Trump is in the Oval Office. Trump is in the presidency. And this is what's happening. You have to get these people out of this country that are not U.S. citizens who do not have any legitimate reason to be here, basically. And so I've kind of gone over, the the minors of it, the elementary layers to it. But I want to bring a couple things up while I'm with you tonight. And the first thing I want to talk about has to do with the actual event in Minneapolis, because, as I said, this is not an organic uprising. This is not people exercising their constitutional right to protest. And this is not the freedom of speech type of stuff. This is quite different than that. And what I mean by that is essentially this is all choreographed, all orchestrated. This is basically ultimately going to be an attempted communist takeover of America. That's essentially what's on the table. The deep state doesn't have many cards left to play. They pushed the pandemic, that failed. And I think, and people have talked about Trump. Why did he go along with the clot shot and stuff? Well, basically, and I don't pretend to know all the stuff about it, my understanding is that, he knew that the deep state had this plan to bring the population down. We all know what Bill Gates said. We got to reduce the population by 10-15%. I forget the exact wording, but I did play that in a previous broadcast some time ago, months or years ago. And basically, the deep state needed to depopulate in order to ultimately accomplish the evil, sinister plots they wanted to accomplish against mankind. And so basically, Trump and the Patriots had to speed up rapidly, force the deep state to accelerate. And basically, the virus, I got to be careful because of the algorithms on YouTube, but basically, the C-19 stuff, okay, basically natural herd immunity, if you will, was achieved ultimately. So, basically, in more ways than one, the deep state was kind of short-circuited with that plan, okay? But unfortunately, as with war, you do have loss of life. It's very tragic when it happens, and you hope that people that are awake, that there are people that are awake that don't go along with it, and therefore they don't get, that thing, the clot shot. But so that was what the deep state had in mind. And you saw what happened in a number of different places. All the rights of people just went out the window. I know I was living in North Carolina back in the day, and that government was tyrannical, but, you had states like that to varying degrees of tyranny, but you had other states like the one I'm in now, Tennessee, that although local municipalities had their local tyrants, like a health department kind of stuff, like here in, I guess I just kind of let the cat out of the bag, but Knox County, I don't like to generally say where I live exactly, but, you had local tyrants, but on a state level, generally, at least by comparison, not the level of tyranny that you would have in other states like North Carolina, California, New York, and all the rest. But in any case, then the deep state, they were not successful in pushing their plan forward. So they only have a few cards left. And so what do you have? You have, basically, you have basically on the table the possibility of World War III. And let me be very clear. That's what the deep state wants. But Trump and the Patriots are doing things to stop the deep state from accomplishing that. One of the things is, renegotiating with countries and basically, basically putting, tariffs can have a number of different functions, but, Trump is negotiating behind the scenes. And I've heard that he's talked to Putin, he's talked to Xi, and, there's actually a mutual agreement that they want to resist the deep state. There's a common enemy to them. I'm not so sure how much I believe the Xi part, but I could see it with Putin, honestly, because Russia apparently just basically banned the Satanic Church from Russia. So I don't know about you, but Russia doesn't sound like the worst country on the planet to me. In fact, quite the contrary. And yet we don't have the guts to do that here in this country. Because freedom of religion is, people try to pervert the meaning of that. But anyways, let me bring this up for you because this is organic. This is what I was talking about, how the Minneapolis protests, how they were not, it's not organic. It's very choreographed. It's highly, highly planned. And this is the deep state trying to cause chaos because as Trump and the Patriots are trying to get these people out that the deep state brought in, and of course the media, they try to manipulate the story and try to manipulate your emotions. It is psychological warfare or a psyop. So you have all of that going on. But this is, I'm not going to share everything about this because it's pretty extensive and I'm still kind of getting my head around it. So, with all of this, but basically this is what has broken in the last couple of days. This is from Kim Higby on X, and he writes, Minneapolis signal infiltrated. I have infiltrated organizational signal groups all around Minneapolis with the sole intention of tracking down federal agents and impeding, assaulting, and obstructing them. Buckle up, all will be revealed. Each area of the city has a signal or several signals. Let's start with a screen recording of all members of the South Side group to start. Now, what he's talking about there, Signal, he's referring to, I believe, to the app Signal. It's like a private messaging platform, basically. And so he's got all these different people. He took a recording here, and all these different people have signed up for it. And that's what you have, and it goes on for quite a while. Now let me go to this now. Let me scroll down here. So this is what he says. I have been undercover inside the groups for days. You'll notice emojis next to people's names. Here's a key for what those emojis mean. The highlighted positions are the most crucial. Most are self-explanatory. Mobile patrols spend their entire shift searching for suspicious vehicles. When they find one, they send it to the group so that, quote-unquote, plate checkers can compare with their database and see if it's a known federal vehicle or if the patrol can make the confirmation so that the database can be updated. Dispatch runs a maxed out call all day protesters where ICE has been spotted and how they can be best impeded. So there's a screenshot there. Continuing on a little bit. For each occupation or shift position, protesters have to undergo training. It's unclear what the training entails other than numerous slides of instruction. I've seen it mentioned repeatedly. Who's paying for all this? Well, that's a good question right there. And then continuing on, this is what he says here. Each chat for a specific part of each city has smaller districts broken up within it called patrol zones, which guide ICE chasers on where they should be positioned. And then here's a screen recording of their plate database as well as a link to its instructions. So this goes on and on and on. But he has extensive evidence. But basically, they constantly misidentify vehicles, and it's a mess. But basically, at one point it looks like he was identified as ICE, even though he's not. And so and I believe if you continue on, he says something to the effect of they like to delete chats, they delete messages repeatedly in order to cover up their tracks as time goes on, and they basically refresh every day, whatever that means. But basically, this is what this all kind of amounts to. So basically, the chat is like the deep state, basically getting people to be their foot soldiers to basically try to impede ICE. So it's not just people showing up and just thinking, oh, I have this grievance, I think it's terrible what ICE is doing, and I'm just going to be vocal about it and all of that. No, this is a highly choreographed group of people that are trying to obstruct federal agents from conducting their duties in law enforcement. That's the simplest way I know to put it. Now, like I said, it goes on and on and on, but basically the whole point of it is to confront ICE agents where they are known to be conducting, law enforcement where there might be suspected illegal aliens. So let me pivot to this because it's a short clip, but it kind of sums it all up in a very nice, very succinct soundbite, because this is what I was talking about, how this is not just random people, this is not average citizens, this is not you or me going to, this is not, and I wouldn't anyway, because I'm not on their side, but I'm saying this is not like your neighbor and things like that. These are people that are being, I'm not saying all these people in that group chat, but it seems like there are certainly people instigating a lot of this chaos. They are being paid to do it. And the question is, who is paying them? So without further ado, let me put this up real quick and play it for you. This is from Fox News. I'm not a fan of Fox News. I'm not really a fan of any of the mainstream media. I do occasionally listen to some of what they're saying because I got to be informed about what the narratives are in order to hopefully conduct this job a little bit better, to be well informed of what the narratives are. But let me play this for you. This is from Laura Ingraham because this is a great, this is a good moment of TV right here. She asks, she's confronting one of the protesters in Minneapolis, and just listen to what the protester has to say.
Shame! Shame!
Do you have a job? Do you have a job?
Shame! Shame! I'm getting paid right now! Shame! Shame!
I love how she throws up her thumbs up like, gotcha, and basically, yeah, the protester says, I'm being paid right now. So my best guess to that would be, well, who's paying her? It's obviously being paid to do what she's doing. And like I said, it's not an organic uprising. It's not. It's the deep state trying to get people stirred up and I think ultimately try to launch a counter to all that Trump is trying to do. Ultimately, they're trying to bring about a communist takeover of the United States of America. I don't believe it's going to happen. I don't believe it will go. I don't believe the communist takeover will happen, but this is why we got to be so vigilant because, the media is lying to you constantly. And the final point I want to make on all this is to say that the media, they're trying their best, and they know they're very good at this. They know how to manipulate stories to appeal to your emotions. And I find that in my personal life, and I'm just going to kind of, I'm just going to say this, Satan, one thing he loves to do is what I would call jump scares. Basically where, through, whatever, however Satan chooses to do it, he tries to scare you into doing or not doing something. And in this case, with the mainstream Mockingbird media, they're trying to appeal to your emotions to either scare you or to convince you through manipulation of information that you need to just, go along with this narrative. And that's pretty much what the mainstream media exists to do. I'm utterly convinced that a lot of these companies, ABC, CBS, NBC, MS Now, Fox News, CNN, and others, I don't believe that they would even exist, at least not in their current form, if they were not being funded by people with that very goal in mind. And that's the best way I know to summarize all of that. And so what I would just say is that the most important thing you can do is, trust God, lean not on your own understanding. He will direct your paths. God will not just leave you hanging and stuff. Basically God gives you a conscience. So it's like, as your confidence in him is being built up, you will take steps every day. And so in the case of this, you just trust, I don't understand everything, God, but it's like, okay, I'm not going to be manipulated by this. And so if you're someone out there that's thinking, these innocent, and I'm putting that in quotations, innocent people are being shot, who, by the way, what's her name? Renee Good. Her car, I guess you could say, lunged forward and actually struck an ICE agent. And as I understand it, had internal bleeding, it later emerged. But, that happened. But the media made you think, she was just there. She was upset with the ICE agents, but she wasn't hurting anyone, and this ICE agent just shoots her in the face. Yeah, the ICE agent was acting in self-defense because a car was hitting him. Now, what I'm not quite clear, was it the same ICE agent that was being hit by the car that also shot? Frankly, that is not even a relevant matter because an immediate threat to life was taking place. And that is the threshold for self-defense. And in the second case, this other guy, I think his last name is Petrie, if I'm not mistaken, and they push out this narrative about him. He's an ICU nurse, and he just got shot, and it's like, he wasn't just staying there. He was confronting an ICE agent, and some of the details of that are still unclear, but these people are not just randomly protesting and then, an ICE agent picks one off. These are people that are picking a fight with an ICE agent, and if you're using deadly force, yeah, don't be surprised if all of a sudden, on the part of the ICE agent acts in self-defense. You don't get to use deadly force to make a point. If you use deadly force, you might just have deadly force thrown right back at you. And it's terrible. It's terrible. It's very sad that you have people that are so brainwashed. And I think that's the other point to be made, that these people are brainwashed, because if they had the conscience for it, and if they understood truly what was going on, they wouldn't be taking money to go out there. And I'm not saying these two individuals were being paid, but there are people being paid, generally speaking. And so, that's the level of the psychological warfare that's taking place here. So, almost coming up on 30 minutes, and I want to just wrap up real quick by briefly and broadly addressing sort of my what's been going on. So basically, I've had I'm trying to choose my words carefully, only because the person of concern is very private. And so basically, and this is the public forum, so I have to be more cautious on that point anyway, but basically there's been a family medical emergency that started almost 2 months ago. We're almost to the end. It's not the end of the crisis, but it's about to, the chapter of it is about to change. And so I've been very busy with that, as well as other things on a personal level. and I just haven't had the mental bandwidth to host this show. There's not a deputy that can step in this chair and host, in my absence. It's just not set up that way, at least not right now. I wish that there was, but that's just the way it is. So my apologies to anyone that would, I guess, expect to see this report more regularly. But things have just been, it's been a very tense, a very, I think I could say this, a very difficult couple of months. And I just truly think that it's like one of those things that unless you've been through something like this, you don't really understand everything that's, you really don't understand on the level to truly understand it, basically. But all that to say, God is good. God's been with me. He's been with us. And we're getting through this. And we have to believe that. And it's a fact. He is with us as we navigate all of this. So, okay. I think that's the end of this report. God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight, everyone. I hope I'll be back on pretty soon with the Citizen Report again. And don't forget the website, thecitizenreport.net. You can go there to get all the links for the Citizen Report. You can follow me personally on X. I'm Jonathan Shannon, of course, and my username is JFilmGuy, JFilmGuy. And, and like I said, I hope I'll see you again very soon here on the Citizen Report. And God bless each and every one of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. Your prayers in Jesus' name, by the way, as I close, are very much needed. I think I'll say that as well, and they're very much appreciated. I think that's pretty much the only other thing I know to say right now. So I hope to see you again very soon, and yeah. So until next time, everyone, just stay vigilant and just know that what you're being fed in the TV, radio, online, you got to always ask the question of what they're really trying to manipulate you into believing. And, instead of being able to just simply judge the facts as they are. So make sure to keep that front of mind as well. So God bless each and every one of you, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the Citizen Report, and I will see you right back here again next time. Have a great night, everyone.